The soft glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across Rodeo Drive, painting the luxury storefronts in hues of orange and gold. The air, still warm from the California sun, carried the scent of expensive perfume and freshly brewed coffee. From the bustling sidewalk, one could glimpse the elegant interior of Lumiere, a beacon of exclusivity and fine dining in the heart of Beverly Hills. Inside, the restaurant hummed with a carefully orchestrated symphony of clinking glasses, hushed conversations, and the gentle tinkling of a grand piano. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on the polished marble floors and the crisp white tablecloths. Every detail, from the meticulously arranged flower displays to the gleaming silverware, spoke of wealth and sophistication. Lumiere wasn't merely a place to eat, it was a stage where the affluent came to see and be seen. Ashley, a seasoned waitress with an air of practiced elegance, moved through the dining room with the grace of a seasoned performer. Her neatly styled hair, impeccable uniform, and polished smile were all part of the carefully crafted persona she presented to the world. Working at Lumiere wasn't just a job for Ashley. It was a symbol of her own aspirations, a validation of her place in this world of luxury and refinement. But beneath the polished exterior, a streak of arrogance ran through Ashley. She possessed a keen eye for judging patrons, quickly categorizing them based on their attire, demeanor, and perceived social status. Some people just don't belong here, she often thought, her gaze lingering a moment too long on those who didn't fit her narrow definition of worthy. The smooth whoosh of the restaurant's heavy glass doors announced the arrival of a new customer. Mark Zuckerberg, dressed in faded jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a well-worn denim jacket, stepped into the opulent space. His attire, a stark contrast to the surrounding extravagance, spoke of a man unconcerned with the trappings of wealth and status. He moved with an unassuming air, his gaze taking in the elegant surroundings with quiet curiosity. Ashley, engaged in a discussion with a colleague about an upcoming VIP reservation, paused as she noticed Mark. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. He certainly didn't fit the typical Lumiere clientele. Without a word, she gave him a quick once-over, her gaze lingering on his worn sneakers. "Good evening," she said, her voice cool and dismissive. "Can I help you?" "I'd like a table, please," Mark replied, his tone polite and unfazed. Ashley raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on her lips. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "This is a very exclusive establishment." Mark smiled faintly. "Yes, this is the place," he confirmed, his composure unwavering. Ashley let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Okay," she said, shaking her head. "Just a moment. I need to check something." She turned abruptly and headed towards the reception desk, her movements conveying a clear message of dismissal. Mark, unperturbed, waited patiently, his gaze calmly surveying the elegant surroundings. Ashley typed his name into the reservation system, a dramatic flourish accompanying each keystroke. When nothing appeared, she rolled her eyes and returned to Mark, a smug smile on her face. "Well, as I suspected, you don't have a reservation?" she announced, her voice dripping with condescension. "We do have a few tables available, but just so you know, this isn't exactly a casual dining spot." "I'd like to dine here," Mark reiterated, his tone unwavering. Ashley let out an exaggerated sigh and grabbed a menu with a dramatic flourish. "All right," she said, "but I'll need to seat you in a suitable area. Follow me." She led him through the dining room, her pace brisk and dismissive. Instead of guiding him toward the center, where the warm light highlighted the elegant ambiance, she steered him towards the farthest corner, a dimly lit area near the kitchen. "Here you go," she said, dropping the menu onto the table with a thud. "This table is perfect for you. If you need anything, let me know, but only if it's necessary." Mark maintained his slight smile, seemingly unaffected by her rudeness. "Thank you," he replied calmly. "I'm sure this will be an interesting experience." As she walked away, Ashley muttered under her breath, loud enough for a nearby couple to overhear, "He won't last 5 minutes in here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Mark, oblivious to her comment, sat down and opened the menu, his eyes scanning the options with quiet interest. The gentle piano music continued to fill the air, but a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the atmosphere. Ashley, from across the room, watched him with a smug smile, convinced that he would soon retreat in embarrassment. Mark, unfazed by Ashley's blatant disdain, calmly perused the menu. The elegant script and elaborate descriptions of the dishes did little to intimidate him. He had, after all, dined in some of the most exclusive restaurants around the world. Lumiere, while certainly impressive, held no particular mystique for him. Ashley, watching from across the room, saw that he wasn't reacting as she'd expected. He wasn't flustered, he wasn't intimidated, and he certainly wasn't leaving. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. She decided it was time for a more direct approach. With a practiced smile plastered on her face, she approached his table. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" she asked, her voice devoid of any genuine warmth. "Or would you like a recommendation?" Mark glanced up from the menu. "I'll have the filet de boeuf rossini, please," he said, pointing to one of the most expensive items on the menu. Ashley's eyebrows shot up in surprise. She struggled to maintain her composure, a hint of amusement creeping into her eyes. "Oh, of course," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The filet de boeuf rossini, a classic. Just to confirm, sir, you do realize that this dish is $350, correct?" "Yes," Mark replied calmly. "It sounds wonderful." Ashley tilted her head, a smirk playing on her lips. "All right then," she said. "Just to make sure there aren't any misunderstandings later, I suggest you double-check the prices on the menu. We wouldn't want anyone to have any unpleasant surprises." "I'm sure I won't," Mark said, his composure unwavering. Ashley let out a dramatic sigh and jotted down his order. "Very well," she said, her voice condescending. "As you wish, but I'll warn you, our chef prefers dishes like this to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciate fine dining. I hope it meets your expectations." She turned to leave but paused and looked back at him. "Oh, and one more thing," she added, her voice laced with mockery. "The minimum tip expected here is 20%. Keep that in mind while you enjoy." Mark simply nodded, his expression unreadable. As Ashley walked away, she shook her head and muttered to herself, "He's clueless. Absolutely clueless." Mark, left alone with his thoughts, leaned back in his chair and surveyed the room. He observed the other diners, their conversations, their laughter, their carefully curated appearances. He noticed the subtle glances in his direction, the whispers and curious stares. He knew he stood out in this environment, but it didn't bother him. He was comfortable in his own skin, his wealth and success a quiet confidence that needed no outward display. The soft melody of the piano filled the air, creating a soothing backdrop to the scene. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet respite from the bustling city outside. He wasn't here to impress anyone, nor was he seeking validation. He simply wanted to enjoy a good meal in a pleasant atmosphere. Ashley, meanwhile, continued to observe him from a distance. She watched as he calmly sipped his water, his gaze wandering around the room. She saw him smile politely at a passing waiter, his demeanor gentle and unassuming. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Perhaps she had misjudged him, but she quickly dismissed the thought. "He's just putting on an act," she told herself. "He's probably uncomfortable as hell." Determined to expose his supposed discomfort, she decided to make his dining experience as unpleasant as possible. She deliberately ignored his table, prioritizing other patrons, even those who had arrived after him. She chatted with regulars, laughed at their jokes, and went out of her way to cater to their every whim. All the while, Mark sat patiently, his composure never faltering. After an extended wait, an elderly gentleman seated at a nearby table noticed Mark's predicament. He leaned over and with a kind smile said, "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind me interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice that you've been overlooked." Mark smiled back. "Good evening," he replied. "Don't worry, it's all fine." The elderly man chuckled softly. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "sometimes being treated like this is a test of our patience. But I can say with certainty that maintaining your composure in such situations is a great sign of strength." Before Mark could respond, Ashley materialized beside their table, her expression a mix of annoyance and suspicion. "Sir," she said to the elderly man, her voice sharp, "can I help you with something? I wouldn't want you to disturb our customer." The elderly man narrowed his eyes at her, but maintained his composure. "Don't worry, miss," he said. "I was just greeting this gentleman. It's rare to find someone so serene these days." Ashley let out an exasperated sigh. "Well, perhaps you should return to your table and enjoy your dinner," she said, her impatience evident. Mark nodded politely to the elderly man. "Thank you for coming over," he said. "It was a pleasure speaking with you." The man smiled and returned to his table, but not before casting a disapproving glance at Ashley. Ashley, unfazed by the scrutiny, turned back to Mark. "Now then," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "are you ready to order, or are you still trying to decipher the menu?" Mark, ignoring her provocation, calmly placed his order. Ashley, with a dramatic flourish, jotted it down and disappeared into the kitchen. True to form, Ashley continued her campaign of neglect. She made a show of bustling around the restaurant, attending to other tables, taking orders, delivering drinks, all while deliberately avoiding Mark's corner of the room. Each time their eyes met, she would quickly avert her gaze and scurry away, as if he were invisible. The other diners, however, were not oblivious to the unfolding drama. Whispers and curious glances followed Ashley as she moved about the restaurant. The couple who had overheard her earlier comments exchanged indignant looks. The elderly gentleman who had spoken to Mark shook his head in disapproval. Even the pianist, a young woman with a keen eye for human interaction, seemed to infuse her music with a hint of disapproval. Mark, though, remained unfazed. He sat patiently, his gaze fixed on the bustling scene before him. He watched the waiters glide between tables, balancing trays laden with gourmet dishes. He listened to the snippets of conversation, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. He observed the subtle dynamics between the diners, the power plays, the social posturing. It was a fascinating spectacle, a microcosm of human behavior on display. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ashley reappeared, a plate bearing his appetizer held aloft. She placed it on the table with a brusque gesture, the plate clattering against the polished wood. "Here's your appetizer," she announced, her voice laced with sarcasm. "I hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating." Mark thanked her politely, his expression unchanged. Ashley leaned in conspiratorially. "You know," she whispered, "a lot of customers who order this dish end up not liking it. It's not exactly mainstream, but I think you'll do just fine. Good luck." Mark simply smiled and picked up his fork. The appetizer, a delicate creation of seared scallops and exotic mushrooms, was indeed exquisite. He savored each bite, appreciating the subtle flavors and textures. Ashley, watching from afar, saw that he was enjoying the dish. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "He's just pretending," she muttered to herself. "He's probably never tasted anything like it before." She turned away, determined to find another way to rattle him. But as she moved through the dining room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was the one losing control. Mark's composure, his quiet dignity, was beginning to chip away at her carefully constructed facade. The main course arrived, again delivered with a theatrical flourish and a thinly veiled insult. Mark, however, remained unperturbed. He thanked Ashley politely, his eyes meeting hers with a calm that seemed to unsettle her even more. As the evening progressed, Ashley's attempts to provoke Mark became increasingly desperate. She loudly complained about customers who don't know their place. She made snide remarks about his attire. She even went so far as to accidentally spill a glass of water near his table. But Mark remained impassive, his composure a silent rebuke to her every attempt at humiliation. The other diners, meanwhile, grew increasingly uncomfortable. The whispers and glances escalated to open stares and disapproving murmurs. The couple who had witnessed Ashley's earlier behavior finally decided to intervene. "Excuse me," the woman said, approaching Ashley with a stern expression. "I couldn't help but overhear your comments earlier. I find your behavior towards that gentleman to be completely unacceptable." Ashley, taken aback by the confrontation, stammered a response. I was just what?" the woman interrupted. "Just being rude and condescending? Just trying to humiliate someone because you don't think they belong here?" Ashley's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. The woman continued, her voice rising with indignation. "This is a restaurant, not a social club. Everyone who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or how much money they have. Ashley, now the center of attention, felt a wave of shame wash over her. She glanced around the room, her eyes meeting the disapproving gazes of the other diners. For the first time, she realized the extent of her own arrogance. Mark, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke. "Thank you," he said to the woman, his voice calm and steady. "I appreciate you speaking up." He then turned to Ashley, his gaze piercing. "You know," he said, "I've dined in some of the finest restaurants around the world. I've met royalty, celebrities, billionaires, but I've never encountered anyone as rude and unprofessional as you." Ashley's eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but Mark cut her off. "You seem to think that your job here gives you the right to judge people," he continued, his voice rising with quiet intensity. "But you're wrong. Your job is to serve, to create a welcoming atmosphere, to make everyone feel comfortable and valued, and you failed miserably." Ashley's face crumpled. Tears welled up in her eyes as the full weight of her actions crashed down upon her. She had spent years building a carefully crafted persona, a shield of arrogance and superiority, and in a matter of minutes it had all come crashing down. Mark, seeing her distress, softened his tone. "Look," he said, "I'm not here to make you feel bad, but I hope this experience teaches you a valuable lesson. You never know who someone is or what they've been through. So before you judge, before you dismiss, before you humiliate, take a moment to consider that you might be wrong." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We all make mistakes," he continued, his voice now filled with compassion. "But it's what we do after those mistakes that truly defines us. I hope you choose to learn from this, to grow, to become a better person." Ashley, her tears flowing freely, nodded silently. Mark smiled gently. "Now," he said, "if you'll excuse me, I'd like to finish my dinner." He turned back to his table, leaving Ashley standing there, a broken figure amidst the wreckage of her own arrogance. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with tension moments before, now fell silent. The diners, humbled by the scene they had just witnessed, returned to their meals, their conversations subdued and reflective. Ashley, wiping away her tears, slowly made her way back to the kitchen. As she passed Mark's table, she paused and looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of shame and gratitude. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her silent apology. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Mark finished his meal, paid his bill, including a generous tip, and left the restaurant, his head held high. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he couldn't help but smile. He had come to Lumiere seeking a quiet dinner, but he had left with something far more valuable, the satisfaction of knowing that he had made a difference.